Keeping It Teal podcast. We are the CCU sports podcast that truly keeps it teal 24/7. I'm your host, Hunter Santiago, and I'm joined today by my two co-hosts, AJ Moran and Jay Largent. Welcome back to the Keeping It Teal podcast, everybody. We just got done a really great 34-6 W from the Coastal football program during homecoming, parents weekend, and alumni weekend. Let me tell you, what a time to burn down Conway in the most respectful way possible. What a great atmosphere. What a great day to be a Chanticleer. Hey, and a great game by Jared Guest. For Jared Guest, he was 14 to 20, 289 passing yards, 3 touchdowns and 1 interception. Look, no disrespect to the guy, but, 1 interception for him really isn't that bad. Sure, there's some stuff that he needs to tighten up, especially if he's going to continue starting going forward. But overall, I was impressed by Jared Guest, especially during the first and second quarter when he went out there just dealing. So, hey, excited. We're happy. I think Conway's happy. We're excited to see how the season plays out. And, I'm just happy to say that we have a shot at the East still. That just makes the season so much more fun going week in and week out. We're taking it one game by one game. All right, so I'm going to pass it to the guys. What do you guys think about the Marshall Coastal Carolina football game? AJ, what do you got?
Yeah, Hunter, that was an exciting game to watch. I'm sure myself as well as most of you guys were nervous a little bit going into that game, just knowing what Marshall's capable of. But like you said, Jared Guest cooked. We were worried about what he's going to be able to do, whether or not he's going to be able to deliver, just based on what we've seen him do in the past. But he did well last week. Also, just the offense as a whole was really impressive. They played really well. On the defensive side of the ball, they were really impressive as well. 5 turnovers, that's big time. You don't get that every day. Special teams, they were a little shaky. Muff punt, block field goal, stuff like that. We have got to clean that stuff up a little bit, especially if you want to keep winning down the road. But just in general, 427 total yards of offense. We were all over the field. And like you said, the attendance record, I believe it was 21,324 people. That's the most people we've ever had in Brooks Stadium. So people showed out and people were loud. Again, alumni weekend and stuff obviously factored into that. But the attendance there was definitely a factor in that game. Now, again, got to keep it teal. So on the con side, some of the things, that we're worried about is now this whole mixture of QBs, right? Is like, we'll go into it, but, Grayson McCall, we don't know if he's probably not going to play next game. We don't know what his return is going to be. Again, we saw Jared Guest do well. But we also saw Ethan Vasco and Boda come in and play a little bit, take a couple snaps. So I'm curious to see how they continue that mixture of QBs, how they figure it out down the road. And also Marshall, again, kind of handled us that game a little bit. Again, the 5 turnovers. They had a quarterback situation. Both guys weren't great, right? Turn the ball over a lot, which is some credit to us and also some credit, and some for them was just, some mistakes and sloppiness on their end. So they kind of handled it to us a little bit. But Jay, what did you think of that game?
Obviously, that was the best game of the season so far. 34 points to not even surrendering a touchdown. You can't say enough good things about Coastal Carolina football against the Thunder and Herd. The defense was swarming, 5 turnovers. Offense was moving the ball down the field at ease, and you just can't say enough good things about Jared Guest. A fifth-year senior coming in and playing the game of his life and just willing the team on to win and getting us ready for a big showdown in the 7-5-7 this coming weekend against ODU.
All right, now that we have covered the Marshall homecoming game, we can now transition over to our Old Dominion preview. One of the major breaking news that came out today was that Coach Tim Beck announced quarterback Grayson McCall will be out for the game against Old Dominion, but may potentially have a return before the end of the season, which is something that we can look out for in the near future. But with that said, Jared Guest will be starting once again against Old Dominion. And I'm going to bring it back over to the guys to talk about Old Dominion's season so far and what we should be looking out for. Jay, what do you got?
Obviously, they're a tough place to play. They defend home turf well. The Virginia Tech Hokies came in the past 2 times, and ODU has beat them both times at home. And if we're not ready to play, we're going to get beat on Saturday against ODU. And they've had a 4-4 year. They're up and down, but they're 3-2 in conference, and they played Jamie really tough last weekend. I almost would think they should have won last week, and they're going to be very tough to go up against on Saturday afternoon. AJ, what you got?
Yeah, for me, so far as the history, ODU's 2-0 all time against us. One of them being coming last season, and then the other time was actually when they faced off at the FCS level. So they're a little bit familiar with ODU and what they're like. Also, some things to note about ODU: this is a tough, like hard-nosed, hang-around team. They've had 7 straight one-score games. 7, right? That's the most in the country. They're 4-3 in those one-score games. So again, they hang around, right? Regardless of who their opponent is, they're going to hang around. They're going to battle. It's going to be a dogfight, and that's something that you're going to have to come ready to play, and you're going to have to start and finish.
Hey, and now that we know a little bit of information about how Old Dominion's season has been and kind of how they've been in and out of a lot of one-score games, let's transition over to some Old Dominion players that we should look out for. AJ, who are some Old Dominion offensive and defensive players that we should keep an eye on?
Yeah. So on the offensive side of the ball, I'm going number 18, sophomore wide receiver Ray Mello Murphy this week. He's got 15 catches for 302 yards this season and 2 touchdowns. And he's been active as of late, man. The past couple of games, he's been a big time factor for them. So I think as those one of those guys that the defensive backs are gonna have to watch out for, and they're gonna have to make sure they're covering him. You can't leave him too open. And on the defensive side of the ball, I'm going with redshirt sophomore linebacker number 15 Wayne Matthews. 70 total tackles on the year, 4 tackle for loss, 1.5 sacks, and a forced fumble. Just a guy that's massive on the defensive side of the ball. And this week, unfortunately, no special picks. Nobody in special teams or anything we have to watch out for. I think I kind of went over 2 on those picks. Those guys weren't as big impact as I thought. And this week, no special ones for me. But Jay, who do you got?
Obviously, on the defensive side of the ball, you got to go with their anchor on the defense, their captain on the defense, Jason Henderson, linebacker. I mean, this dude can hit, and if we don't block him, he's going to have a field day in the backfield. I mean, he has 119 tackles on the year, 15 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks, and for his career, he has 383 total tackles, and he has a whole nother season to play for ODU. And if we don't stop him, he's going to have a field day against us. Now on the offensive side of the ball, I have QB Grant Wilson. He started out good on the season, but had a couple of picks, but he's straightened out, and he hasn't thrown a pick since their September game against Texas A&M Commerce. And last week, he threw for his highest yards on the season with 277 against JMU, and also he's a DMV kid, so he can play some ball.
All right, now that we know some Old Dominion players to look out for in this game, how does Coastal Carolina win at Old Dominion? Jay, what do you got?
Obviously, going into the 7-5-7, I mean, they got some certified ballers in there. We're going to have to play very sound football and very physical like we did against Marshall. Everybody playing as a cohesive unit and getting out early, scoring every time we get the ball, because if not, they're capable of beating us on Saturday afternoon. I mean, the last time an ACC school has come into their stadium, they've beaten them both times, and they're a very tough out on Saturday. AJ, what you got?
Yeah, for me, like I mentioned earlier, this one's going to be a dogfight, right? This one's not going to be easy. As with all the games you see, they're going to have to stay disciplined this week. They're going to have to stay locked in. Hot start, strong finish. Again, we've kind of been saying it every week. And they've delivered, but they haven't delivered for me. They've had that strong finish, but just a hot start, but the strong finish it's maybe been there, maybe not been there. They're going to have to really stay locked in this week. Again, 7 straight one-score games for Old Dominion. They're going to keep it close, and you're going to have to come ready to play. We're going to have to copy-paste, if you will, the Marshall game, play that same way against Old Dominion. And the biggest question for me is, right, is can Jarrett Guest do it again? Right? It's like we saw that he kind of proved us wrong a little bit last week against Marshall. I still have my doubts. Some people don't. Some people are like, okay, this kid's a Heisman Award winner, But for me, I still have my doubts. And I'm just curious to see whether or not he can do it again.
One stat that matters when it comes to this football game, gentlemen, will be Coastal Carolina's offense having 0 turnovers. If we want to avoid staying to the trend that Old Dominion has of recent of these one possession games, we need to avoid any and all turnovers, not just Jared Guest, but no fumbles by running backs or receivers. We need a very clean offensive game. And in that, I think we could win by 10 or more. But if we turn the ball over even one time, I truthfully believe this will stay to Old Dominion's trend of one-possession football games. So let's look out for Coastal Carolina's offense to have a very clean game in Norfolk, Virginia. Let's transition over to some Coastal Carolina football players to look out for in this game. AJ, who do you have?
Yeah, so this week, I think it's kind of obvious. You got to go with Jared Brown on the offensive side of the ball. He's been a big time impact. Every game he's been an impact. Sometimes he's been, more so than others. But last week, ginormous game from him. 5 catches, 117 yards, and 2 touchdowns last week. Again, he was a big time factor in that win. And on the defense side of the ball, I'm going with Clayton Isbell this week. Again, we mentioned him earlier. He's coming back up. 8 total tackles last week, 4 solo tackles. Again, it's so important that you have someone like that on the defensive side of the ball. And those guys are going to be big time impacts. But Jay, who do you got?
Obviously, I got to go with number 7, my picture, Jared Guest. I want to see how he does in his second game. Is it a fluke, or is he going to come out firing like he did in game 2? Is he going to hit his open receivers, get the offense going very early on? Because if we do, we're going to have a good shot of winning on Saturday. And on the defensive side of the ball, I got to go with Michael Mason. I mean, what can you say about the transfer? I mean, he was all over the place on Saturday against Marshall. He had a forced fumble, a lot of tackles, and I mean, when he goes, our defense goes. Hunter, who you got?
For me, offensively, I got CJ Beasley. And the main reason is if you look back at the statistics from the game between Coastal Carolina and Marshall, through the air, Jared Guest was carving it up. Our receivers were going nuts. Brown was just going absolutely crazy with 2 touchdowns, 117 yards. But running, our 2 players with the most rushing yards were our quarterbacks, Jared Guest and Ethan Vasco. I think that says a whole lot about how much we struggled running the ball in this game, even though we had a fairly dominant win, I think we can say, with the 34-6 win. But we could have had so many more points if we had guys running for over 50 yards at the running back position. So look out for CJ Beasley to have a breakout game against Old Dominion to kind of take a little bit more pressure off of Jared Guest having to run the ball himself, as well as, messing up the defense, making them have to think twice about, are they going to run the ball? Are they going to throw the ball? Is Guest going to run the ball? I mean, that's kind of really how we were successful with McCall in 2020 and 2021, right? They really did not know what we were going to do on any given down. And I think that is exactly how you win out the rest of the season with Jared Guest, by running a similar offensive style to the previous Coastal Carolina football programs, while also tailoring to the specific traits that Jared Guest brings to the table. That's why I think that CJ Beasley having a really great rushing game, probably I'd say about 70 yards or more and 1 touchdown, would be the kind of game I'd like to see CJ Beasley to have this week. Defensively, Juwan Powell. Old Dominion has 2 really good running backs, but they also have a plethora of receivers with 1, 2, or 3 touchdowns. You never really know which guy they're going to go to in the red zone. And Juwan Powell is our best cornerback on the team. I know Clayton Isbell is definitely our best safety, but Powell is by far our leader in the cornerback room, at least by stats so far this season, as well as snaps he's taken. Look for him to be either locking down one of Old Dominion's top receivers or splitting reps between the different targets that they target in their red zone drives. So, yeah, defensively, I'm going with Juwan Powell. Guys, hey, that wraps up our review of the Old Dominion game as well as our review of the Marshall game. Let's get into the Sun Belt Pick'ems, one of our favorite segments. It's so competitive. We love it. We know the other podcasts do it, but we cannot not participate in this kind of segment. Obviously, we didn't start until 2 weeks ago, so about halfway through the season. So we're doing the second half of the season in full. It's super exciting. So far, top of the leaderboard, AJ is 11-2 throughout the season. 1 loss the first week and 1 loss last week. I'm second right now at 9-4 on the season, going 5-2 last week. And then Jay rounds out the group respectively with an 8-5 overall record, but a very, very poor week last week with a 4-3 kind of win-loss ratio. Before we get into it, Jay, what are your thoughts on sitting at the bottom of the pack going into the picks this week?
Obviously, I got some work to do. I need to get on my picks. My teams need to perform better on the field for me in order to make a move on this leaderboard.
Well said. Well said, Jay. AJ, I'm going to give you a little time to flex and brag about your 11-2 overall, top of the leaderboard.
Yeah, I mean, you know how I love to flex, and I love to brag about that. I said it to you guys before we hit the record button here, but I just had the script, and I'm just going off the script. I mean, the only one I lost last week was that Southern Miss App State game, and they almost had him. People might have thought it was a joke just because I don't like App State very much, nor does anybody for that matter. But they almost had him. They impressed me, and they made it close, and they kept it there, and I was almost right again. So now that's back-to-back weeks now, where only one loss each week, and they were close games. Right, they almost had them, no blowouts, and like I said, I just call it like I see it.
All right, then. Hey, let's start now, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get into week 3 of the Sun Belt Pick'ems for the Keeping It Teal podcast. We're starting out with South Alabama at Troy. Jay, who are you picking, good sir?
Obviously, I'm going to keep it till right here. I mean, at the vet, I got to go with the Troy Trojans and Gunnar Watson and Coach John Summerall against USA. I mean, Troy's been there for many of years, and they don't like South Alabama. South Alabama doesn't like them, so I see the Trojans winning nicely against South Alabama.
AJ, let's see what you got. Who do you have in this game?
Yeah, I'm going with my Sun Belt West champion and Sun Belt Conference champion back-to-back Troy Trojans. They looked good last week against Texas State. I know that was a nice test for them. Right, you get to see what that team was really made of. And like I said, this team's pretty good. They're legit. And they're at home getting against South Alabama, and I feel bad for the Jaguars in this one, but they might just get smoked.
For the South Alabama Troy game, I'm also going to stick with the pack here. I'm going to go with Troy. I just really don't think that you can pick South Alabama during this game. Even though I understand that Troy's not having the most beautiful season, this team defensively is still very strong and has enough offensive weapons to go out there and compete with a team like South Alabama and pull out the dub at home. All right, and we move on to the second game of this week's schedule. We have ULL, Louisiana at Arkansas State. Jay, who do you got in this game?
Got to go with the Cajuns. I mean, they were on top of the conference like we were for 2020, 2021. I mean, Arkansas State's not there, and I don't see them being back anytime soon. So I have the ULL Raging Cajuns winning big on Saturday against Arkansas State.
AJ, are you taking ULL or are you taking Arkansas State in this one?
I'm going with ULL this week, Jay. I like where your head's at, right? Ride or die Cajuns. This is now the third week in a row I'm taking the Cajuns. I know Arkansas State's at home, right? And the Troy South Alabama game, that game's on a Thursday night, right? At Troy, I know that one's, forgot to mention it earlier, but that one's going to be a big time environment for them. And just like in this one, I just don't know if Arkansas State can create the environment needed in order to beat the Cajuns this week. And like I said, they let me down week 1. They came back and they delivered last week against South Alabama, and they're going to come back and deliver again against the Red Puppies.
For me, in this one, I'm also going to take ULL. I just don't see Arkansas State winning this game. I honestly don't even think this game is going to be remotely close. I'd project ULL to win by at least 20. Keep an eye out on that one. And let's move on to the boys in teal. Coastal Carolina at Old Dominion. AJ, let's start you off with this one. Who's winning this game?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna go CCU here. Hold on, I'll do the little headgear pick for you. Gotta go Coastal. Ride or die. Like I said, I have my doubts. To use a tough team, they're gonna keep this one close, right? They're gonna keep it to a 1-score game probably if they continue the trends they've been continuing. We got a backup quarterback. He's gonna have to come in. He's gonna have to deliver. But I'm sticking with Coastal this week.
Jay, who do you have in this one?
Obviously, I spent 5.5 years at this school. I mean, I can't bet against Coastal. I mean, Coastal's going to win by 2 scores at least on Saturday at SP Ballard Stadium, and we get our first win ever over ODU.
I'm also going to pick our boys in teal. I think kind of like what I said earlier at the end of our Old Dominion preview. If we keep the game clean, I think we win by 2 possessions or more. If this game has at least a turnover or two by either Jared Guest or anyone else on the offensive side of the ball for Coastal, I think this will be a 1-possession victory. But I believe the boys in teal will come out with a victory in Norfolk, Virginia this weekend. All right, let's move over to JMU at Georgia State. Jay, who do you have winning this game?
I'm going to go with a little sleeper pick. I have the Georgia State Panthers defending home turf against James Madison. And our boy Chad Staggs is going to have a masterclass to slow down the Dukes, and the Dukes will be ranked no more.
AJ, what do you got in this game?
You see, Jay, this is why you're 8-5. You do stuff like this, dude. I'm going with JMU. I've been telling you. See, now this is the second time Jay has gone against the Dukes. He was wrong the first time. He's going to be wrong the second time. I get it. Georgia State's at home, right? They're coming off a really tough loss against Georgia Southern, right? That one hurt. That one stings a little bit. I know that. They're crying their way back to Atlanta. But I mean, JMU, like I said, this team's legit, right? They're petitioning for people to let them compete for conference championships and bowl games, right? They've been petitioning. The Dukes are ranked in the AP poll, but on the playoff poll. This team's good, and they're gonna. I don't know if Georgia State is gonna be able to handle all they got going on.
For me, I have to stick with JMU during this game. I don't see them losing until maybe when they come to Conway at the very end of the season. But that will be to be determined based on our play and their play going forward. But yeah, I'm sticking with James Madison, unfortunately, to win by at least 2 possessions at Georgia Southern. All right, Jay, who do you have in the ULM versus Southern Miss game?
I'm going to go with Southern Miss here. I mean, I picked ULM last week. They disappointed me. And Southern Miss put up a good fight against App State, and I see them continuing in that into this week and winning a big home game against ULM.
AJ, ULM or USM?
Can somebody get me a plunger? Because this one's the toilet bowl right here, the Sun Belt. Both these teams have had a really, really rough year. And it hasn't been great for either one of them. This one's actually harder for me than it should be, right? I mean, I went with Southern Miss last week, and they almost impressed me, right? They almost had it, but at the same time, they're just so bad. ULM, on the other hand, is also so bad. I might have to literally flip a coin for this one, but you know what? I'm going with the home field advantage in Hattiesburg. Give me the Golden Eagles.
All right. Hey, no, I'm going to have to jump on the train here. I'm going with USM as well. I just don't see, even though ULM has 2 wins on the season and Southern Miss only has 1, I think that Southern Miss has had the harder schedule with the better roster, and I think they will prove it with a freakishly large deficit win of 43-10. That's what I'm calling this week. I think, yeah, Southern Miss is not a team that's even remotely able to compete for their side of the conference at this point, but that doesn't mean that they can't prove they're not the toilet bowl, bottom of the barrel Sun Belt team this year that ULM clearly is. So I'm taking the Eagles. All right, gentlemen, let's move on to the Georgia Southern at Texas State game. We're going to start with AJ. Who do you have in this matchup?
Yeah, for me, Texas State's coming off of a tough loss to Troy at home. Right, we're talking about they might be a Sun Belt West, frisky and fun team for the Sun Belt West, but they had a tough loss against Troy, which makes things, it's not impossible, it makes it really difficult for them to win the West at this point. They need this win so bad, but at the same time, I said it before, this Georgia Southern is my Sun Belt East champion, right? This is the team that I think is built to win the East, and I just don't know if Texas State can do it. So I'm going with the Eagles of Georgia Southern this week.
What about you? What about you, Jay? Who do you have?
I got to stick with my Sunbelt champion, Texas State. I mean, they are right there. They can smell their first ever bowl game, and I think they get it done this week in San Marcos with a very close win over Georgia Southern.
For me, I feel like the logical pick is Georgia Southern. It just makes the most sense. I think they're the more complete team. For Coastal Carolina to win the East, Georgia Southern has to lose another game or 2. Actually, I believe they have to lose 2 more for Coastal to win the East. So I'm picking Texas State to come out here with a W. All right, let's move on to the final game for the Sun Belt Pick'ems this week, gentlemen. We have Marshall at App, the battle of the 4 and 4s. Both of these programs earlier in the year were ranked by many people to be at the top of the Sun Belt East, and both will probably finish towards the middle bottom of the Sun Belt East. Jay, who's winning this game?
Obviously, the Rocks, a very hard place to team. I mean, this is a very old, heated rivalry. These teams don't like each other, but I got to stick with the Mountaineers at home in the high country of Boone, North Carolina, and I have the Mountaineers winning on Saturday.
AJ, are you taking the boys in Boone? Or are you taking the Marshall Herd?
Yeah, for me, this is the battle of mid, not the battle of midway, the battle of mid, right? Both these teams are freakishly mid. Marshall, it's been tough for them, right? I think it's now 4 in a row, including our loss that they've lost. This team's got to find a way to get back on track, right? It's definitely tough for them. I can only imagine what the locker room's like, right? Losing 4 in a row. Also tough teams, right? But at the same time, it's like, you got to get the morale back up, and you need to win so bad. App State also is in desperate times. And Boone, they barely snuck out with the win against Southern Miss, right? There's one of those that was a little uncomfortable for a while, but they did get a win, but it was a little uncomfortable. For me, I think this Marshall team is better than they've been the past 4 weeks. They've had some quarterback troubles, again, way too many turnovers. But I think they go back in that locker room, back on the practice field. They find a way to figure it out, and they come to Boone ready to play. And I think they beat up the Mountaineers in Boone. Like I say, anybody but App State. So we're going with Marshall this week.
All right. I'm going to go the opposite of AJ here. I'm going to pick App. I think when you look at it, you would assume that Marshall's going to bounce back after the brutal last couple weeks they've had. I think App State right now, with their head coach, does not want to get fired. And he's going to do whatever it takes to kind of finish the season, hopefully somewhere between the 7-5 and 8-4 range to keep his job and get a chance to rebuild this program. So I don't see him losing at home to Marshall, especially to a team that just got their ass handed to them the week before, to a team who went into Boone and won by a 1-possession game. So I really think that App will not only come out with a W, but they'll probably win by somewhere between 10 and 14 points in the 2-possession game. So look forward to seeing the boys in Boone come out here with a W. Now we move on to another segment the guys at the Keeping It Teal podcast like for picks. We're going into the Sun Belt Conference Championship picks. For those of you who haven't been following the podcast before, these are picks that we made about 2 weeks ago during our first ever podcast. These picks, once made, do not get to change throughout the rest of the season. These are the picks for who wins the East, who wins the West, and between those two teams, who wins the championship and the score. And we will review them once every 2 weeks, all the way through the end of the season, to see who was horribly wrong, who was right, or who was, I guess, on the best track to picking the more successful and realistic matchup. So we're going to start out with AJ's picks. He has Georgia Southern winning the East, Troy winning the West, the winner of the Sun Belt Conference Championship being Troy, and then winning by a score of 35-31. Then next up, we have Jay. He has Georgia State winning the East, Texas State winning the West, the winner of the conference championship for the Sun Belt being Texas State, and Texas State winning by a score of 42-28. And then closing out, we have my picks. In the East, I have Coastal winning. In the West, I have ULL, Louisiana Cajuns winning. I have Coastal winning the Sun Belt Conference Championship of 2023, and I have them winning by a score of 30-27 by a field goal at the very end of the fourth quarter, very reminiscent of the W in Louisiana in 2020 with a walk-off field goal. All right, AJ, how do you feel currently about your Sun Belt Conference Championship picks 2 weeks later?
Yeah, I mean, Hunter, just like my Sun Belt pick'ems, I feel stupendous about these picks. Again, on the money. So far I got the two teams who are in the lead of each division. Again, JMU's technically leading the East, but because of their FCS cheese, they're ineligible. So currently, I got the two leaders. So I can't be feeling much better than I am right now. I'm in a great spot. But at the same time, you have to be humble a little bit here because there's still a lot of games to go. A lot of tough ones. So we're just gonna take it, week by week. But so far, so good.
All right, Jay, how do you feel about Georgia Southern winning the East, Texas State winning the West, and Texas State winning it all?
Obviously, Texas State let me down last week with a heartbreaking loss to a very good Detroit team, and they're going to need some help in order for me to come out on top of this and win the Sun Belt Championship. And I'm going to need some help from the West and also from the East with Georgia State winning it for me.
For me and my picks, I'm still feeling pretty confident about Coastal. Obviously, the loss of Grayson McCall last week definitely doesn't make it look as beautiful as I thought it would before. But that W over Marshall with Jared Guest's pretty solid performance makes me believe that whether we have McCall or whether we have Guest, we have a really good shot at winning the East still. I think the JMU game at the end of the season will be the real dictator of all that. Of course, as we know, JMU can't win the conference as they're in their final year of a SCS transition, but that game is still considered a conference loss if we were to lose that game. So hopefully McCall is back by that game, and if not, hopefully Jared Guest is refined enough to where he can go in and exact revenge for the embarrassing loss at the end of last year against James Madison. For UOL, it's not looking beautiful over there, but it definitely feels like they still have a shot at the West, especially with losses by Troy, by South Alabama, and Texas State. It's still wide open on that side, and I'm still pretty confident ULL will make it all the way there. Those crazy Cajuns still have a shot at the West. And overall, I still think our boys in teal are coming out with a Sun Belt Conference championship this year, even with the bumpy road and the 3 losses to our record. All right, gentlemen, that's it for our Sun Belt Conference championship picks. We are now moving on to our third set of pick'ems for the week, our national championship picks. These are our final 4 college football playoff picks. Every 2 weeks until about the end of the season, we are going to be shuffling up who we think our top 4 will be. And by the end, we just have to ride with who we have. I'm going to give you guys a brief overview of who we picked 2 weeks ago. And then we're going to give the guys a chance to change up based on games that have occurred within the last 2 weeks. We're going to start with me. I have probably the least impressive set of picks, but also pretty interesting because it feels like I might have jinxed the majority of these teams except for my winner. I had number 1 being Penn State winning the Big Ten. I had UNC, North Carolina Tar Heels, winning the ACC, Washington winning the Pac-12, and Oklahoma winning the Big 12. Yeah, it's definitely not the most beautiful top 4 looking back on it. But let me tell you, when I made those picks, I was pretty damn confident that at least 3 of the 4 would be in the top 4 by the end of it. Now, I'm not so sure. But I do have Washington winning based on my first set of picks. And I guess we'll find out what it looks like after we review Jay and AJ's. For Jay, we had Georgia at number 1, Oklahoma at 2, Bama at 3, and Florida State at 4, with Jay having the winner being Georgia. Overall, all of these teams are still in play except for maybe Oklahoma, but with their 1 loss, there's still a shot if they win out respectively that they could be. So still fairly good on Jay's end. And then for AJ, we have number 1 Georgia, number 2 Michigan, number 3 Oklahoma, and number 4 Oregon, with Oklahoma once again being one of the ones that still iffy, but there's a shot. And even though Oregon has 1 loss, AJ's argument 2 podcasts ago as to why Oregon would make it is still very reasonable. And he has Michigan winning it all. So we're going to go back to the beginning and we're going to let each of us run through who our new national championship picks are for this switch up. starting with me, I have number 1, Ohio State. I'm swapping out my Big Ten winner for the new Big Ten winner, who is also listed number 1 by the college football playoff rankings as of right now. I'm going number 2, Washington, my one team from my last top 4, who also I had projected at that time to win in the playoffs for college football. I'm moving them up to number 2. Number 3, Florida State. And number 4, winning the SEC, Alabama. With my winner of the college football playoffs, once again, I'm sticking with the Huskies. Washington's coming out with a W. I'm sticking with it until they prove me otherwise. All right, Jay, who's your new top 4?
Obviously, I'm sticking with my number 1 team, the Georgia Bulldogs. I mean, they put a beating on the Gators. I mean, I don't see anybody beating them. I mean, number 2, I'm going to switch, and I'm going to move Bama up to 2. I mean, you just can't bet against Nick Saban when he's still there. And number 3, I'm going to go with the Oregon Ducks. Bo Nix is going to lead Oregon back to the college football playoff. And obviously, I'm going to keep number 4, Florida State. I see them winning the ACC now with North Carolina falling off the tracks. And for my winner, I have the Dogs three-peating.
All right, AJ, let's see what you got.
Yeah, so my 4 teams have actually been doing fairly well for the most part. However, I'm switching things up a little bit here. With number 1, I'm actually going with the Ohio State Buckeyes. College football playoff rankings, the committee just came out with their rankings. They have Ohio State at 1, and I agree with them. I'm actually surprised they put them over Georgia, but I agree with that. Part of that just being strength of schedule, where I think Ohio State plays a stronger schedule, even though the SEC is the SEC. But I'm gonna go with Ohio State at 1, and now that's gonna shake up some of these other things. At 2, I'm going Georgia Bulldogs at 2. I think until somebody proves they could beat them, even with the absence of Brock Bowers, which might factor into why they dropped. I gotta stick with them at 2 here. The number 3, here's where things get mixy. Now, it was Oklahoma. They lost. They lost to Kansas in an ugly one for them, and that bumps them out for me. So for 3, I'm going with Florida State. Now, I didn't put them in at first because they've had some tight games against teams that it shouldn't have been tight, right? They haven't looked super great in certain games, but they've looked better in the recent weeks, and I think that's going to seal them at number 3 for me. So I'm going with the Seminoles there. And number 4, I'm still sticking with it. Jay, again, is getting on the same wavelength. He's finally thinking right. He's with the Oregon Ducks at 4, right? Bo Nix and the boys doing things over there in Eugene. And here's my path, right, Hunter? You mentioned the path. For me, it's they got to win out, right? Maybe Washington drops one somewhere. They almost dropped one to Arizona State. Don't forget about that one. I know, Hunter, you were shaking your boots. Your timbers were a little bit shivered with that one. They almost lost to Arizona State. But the Pac-12 is an absolute gauntlet, right? Like the Pac-12 is tough. And I think Washington could easily drop one. And then what happens is Oregon beat Washington, rematch for the Pac-12 chip. Bo Nix comes in, takes care of business. Vader arc, if you will. And then they'll seal the Oregon Ducks at the 4th spot in the playoff. And then for the overall winner, again, I originally had Michigan. The reason why I kicked them out because they have this whole cheating scandal thing going on. It's a little iffy. I don't know what the deal is over there in Ann Arbor, but I'm staying away from that. Plus, I think the Buckeyes might be a better team anyway. So for that reason, I'm going with the Buckeyes as my new national champion.
All right. Hey, I think, we got some good picks this time. On my end, I do think it's interesting. 3 of my teams got jinxed. Washington stuck. So, like I said, I'm sticking with them Huskies. I really do also think I may be jinxing Ohio State, FSU, and Alabama. And honestly, I wouldn't be too upset about it. It would be crazy to see in the next 2 weeks when we revisit these picks that Ohio State has lost a game, Florida State has lost a game, and Alabama has lost their second matchup of the season. If not, then, hey, maybe I do have second time's a charm for my national championship picks. Overall, a great segment. Great job, guys. Looking forward to revisiting these picks with y'all 2 weeks from now. And now we will transition over to a new segment called Other Things Coastal Carolina Athletics, brought to you by Jay and AJ. Boys, take it away.
Obviously, our volleyball teams have another tremendous season. 12-0 in conference play, 17-7 overall. Got 2 big wins in Huntington, West Virginia last week. You can't say enough good things about volleyball. I mean, they had some unforeseen circumstances to begin the season, but they haven't missed a beat. Coach Lozowick stepped in, and CCU volleyball is on a roll.
Yeah, I'll recap the soccer seasons as they just recently come to a close since our last episode. It was rough seasons for both the soccer teams. I'm gonna put this lightly, but also not so lightly. Coastal's got to win everything by 90, as per always. Men's soccer wrapped up 2023 with a 1-0 loss to Georgia State. So on the year, that puts them 3-9-3 overall, 1-6-2 in conference. Again, not the year they would have, wanted to have. And on the women's side of things, they finished at 3-12-2. And then 0-8-2 in conference. Like I said, both of them had really rough seasons. So hopefully, when we see them next year, they'll be able to improve. And yeah, about this new segment here. Again, other things, CCU athletics, we figured, Jay and I figured that it'd be nice, talk about, maybe things besides the main sports that we're going to talk about. We're not gonna dive in, and break it all down and stuff, just based on our knowledge of them and stuff like that. But we figured, at least keep Teal Nation notified on what some of these other sports are up to. Like I said, you didn't really miss much on the soccer seasons, unfortunately. Like I said, it's been rough ones for them. However, the volleyball team's rolling. The ladies' shots are rolling. So, maybe check them out as they continue their season.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of our third official podcast for the Keeping It Teal podcast. As always, thank you for listening to our latest episode of the Keeping It Teal podcast. Please like and subscribe to our YouTube, X, Instagram, and Spotify to keep up to date with all things Teal. Until next time, good night, Teal Nation.